that led those who've been told for so long by so many to be cynical and fearful and doubtful about what we can achieve, to put their hands on the arc of history and bend it once more toward the hope of a better day. To put their hands on the arc of history, to put their hands on the arc of history and bend it once more, bend it once more, bend it once more toward the hope of a better day. To put their hands on the arc of history and bend it once more, and bend it once more.
The people are so confused they're questioning their own memories.
There is much closer to science fiction than the real world.
The LHC is like a spacecraft venturing into the unknown, looking for answers to these questions. In 4 major experiments called Atlas, Alice, CMS, and LHCb,
that there have to be extra dimensions in the universe. If the LHC is lucky enough to penetrate with its very high energy inside these points that contain extra dimensions, then a complete new field opens up of possible new discoveries.
You're looking at 12,000 tons of metal and electronics, which have been put together with a precision of 5 microns. That's 5,000ths of a millimeter. And it's taken many companies, hundreds of universities and research institutes, and thousands of scientists and engineers to put these precision instruments together.
To put their hands on the arc of history and bend it once more toward the hope of a better day.
Little rabbit coming up here to me. I'm right here and there's a rabbit. Hi rabbit, you're okay. I was sitting still. I don't think the rabbit was paying attention. Oh, run, run, run. It's funny. I will try in the following video to share some information that is actually pertinent to this subject matter, but the subject matter itself, being so vast, will limit us on time, obviously, and space, as it were, in this video. Albeit it is serious and real information that can be used or built upon if one wants to continue in the research concerning such subjects. The European Council for Nuclear Research, also referred to as CERN, has created a lot of stir in most of the public as far as people who are paying attention to such things. When we think of CERN, the LHC, which is the Large Hadron Collider, we hear of terminology like dark matter, the God particle, symmetry, supersymmetry, extra dimensions, wormholes, and interdimensional portals, and the possibilities of time travel and such. Many people are saying that CERN in their experiments are doing secretive things, and much of which is kept from the public for purposes that become obvious as one digs, I suppose. There's a lot of research concerning photons. These are also called light quantums, and it's basically electromagnetic radiation in small packets, if you will. And the photons supposedly hold atoms together, and they're doing studies into the attraction and repulsion and things like that with this technology. Looking into things like supersolids, which are 2 forms of matter that can literally pass through each other and still keep their shape. And there is the possibility that they've looked into teleportation. Supposedly that was already accomplished in 2014 in a very minute and precise scale, very small. And that can be found in the public domain, so most everything that I share with you today in this video you can look up for yourself. The idea of some of the things they're doing at this CERN is being able to bend light by controlling these photons. And much of this has to do with frequency, rather than just magnetics, even though they do use high forms of magnetics to sort of control those bends as they smash these particles together. It is stated they're looking for the beginning of our universe, or the Big Bang Theory. Things that they have said themselves is the possibilities of creating wormholes, or black holes as they call it, interdimensional openings. And that is sort of where we are at. And when we look into this on a larger scale and see there is so much, I think, that the public has sort of missed as you dig into understanding what's happening at CERN. There are many scientists from all over the world that are there, and they're doing their studies, whether it's in their mathematics or their physics or whatever their specialties may be. But the majority of them are from classes and really from schools around the world, and they're just doing what they have been taught to do without understanding the true essence of what is really being done at the CERN facility. And this is because it's almost in a military style, as the fact that things are compartmentalized, just like in your military or in your governments. It's a need-to-know basis kind of thing. As you look into the process of CERN and what they're doing there with these beams of light at super high frequencies and high energy bursts, they are shooting beams in opposite directions and hoping to collide them, or actually colliding them in hopes of finding new particles, such as the God particle or dark matter and things like that. Now, when you really look into this, you have a lot of people in the religious field saying, well, they're going to open what is referred to as the bottomless pit. And when we look into scriptural evidence in the book of Revelation, in chapter 9, we see where that terminology is brought from. It says, "And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power." So here's where things really begin to get interesting, you see. Because, well, there's so much to tell you here concerning these things. I'm going to try and throw in some pictures, but some things just easier to say. Got to jump back in time just for a minute to understand really what's happening at CERN. And this is where it gets tricky.
Jumping back in time, of course, is meant figuratively, as we all know the actual limitations of mankind are ruled by the constraints of space and time itself. However, man is perceived to change time and the laws of physics, as it were, to open doors that in reality should be left closed. Man's understanding of relative time has led many to consider the following excerpt as a possible reality. Angels, demons, and jinn are considered to be outside the constraints of a timeline, though man is still restrained. However, watch the following moments without words to perhaps at least pick up all the hidden clues I put in all of my videos for those with understanding, and then we'll get back to the rabbit hole.
Well, ready to go down the rabbit hole? Let's go. All the way back in time to the 18th century at least. Back when alchemy and those things were happening. Alchemy dealt with the idea of the esoteric mixing in with chemicals. The idea to blend. And they were in search of things like what would have been referred to as a sorcerer's stone. And because a lot of the things they were wanting to discover was also being funded by very rich individuals at the time. And so they studied into elixirs and how to mix things like that. And the human anatomy was always one of the key focuses, because they were thinking as above, so below. Many of you already understand that terminology, but it's true. And their secrets they would write in books without words. They would draw pictures. And those books became called grimoires. And a lot of witchcraft and things that were studied in those days as well. Lots of forms of witchcraft came to be put in old books and grimoires and wrote about, and the different practices, the things that they did. Because it was to keep it a secret, the things learned. And alchemy mixed in with the chemistry of the day and the sciences and the supernatural spiritual stuff started intermingling and creating these things. The ancient writings go way back to the keys of Solomon and things like that. Just a quick study will show you many of the books. On modern shelves, you know, books, theory and practice and magic. Then you start getting into the grimoires and the key of Solomon, the lesser keys, the incense and oils, different kinds of magic. And it's printed over and over and reprinted so that people can find and learn these things and start getting into the spells and magic mixed with witchcraft, natural witchcraft, tactical, and it's all mixed together. And Aleister Crowley's one of the guys that was really demonic. And he was one people broke their teeth on. And it goes right into Luciferianism and the Book of Ceremonial Magic. And you can see how the high magic takes place, and they start going into the sigil magic. And with this, they learn how to draw down or call up demons or angels. The thing is, with these practices in the witchcraft and alchemy, you're thinking, what has this got to do with CERN at all? But it's got a lot to do with it. And it adds validity to a lot of what people are already saying. But people haven't put it together. They're going to open a portal. How are they going to do that? And it's not something new under the sun, as it were. But it's newer technology, bigger technology, more energy being able to be applied. So bear with me, if you will, as we look into this a little bit further. So it's alchemy and the secrets, you know, from the ancient texts, the Book of the Dead and those kinds of things, came some of the magic of old, you know, the Pharaoh, and a lot of the symbols from the fallen of the time. And you can look in any ancient historical religious monument, from the Stonehenge to, you know, the big pyramid type deals. And they began to create things that were sigils or magic circles, if you will. And these were things over time that they had learned to do. But again, as the grimoires grew, they became sought after. by rich individuals who usually had control of them to start with. And so, as time has progressed, the endeavors of some of those ancient books, the ones of the dark magic, the Aleister Crowley kind of things, where they're looking to be able to get rich, or, for instance, the original alchemists, they were searching for things like the Sorcerer's Stone. That's a real thing, the Sorcerer's Stone. They put it in how many movies and things? But it was a chemical substance that when they had the right things and the right ingredients, they could take and add them, like red jasper and moss agate garnet and things like that. But it would turn a jasper color, sort of. This is just red jasper here. But I don't know if you can see it in the light, really. But that would be the color of the Sorcerer's Stone, about that. And the idea was that it could be joined with things like lead, lesser metals they would call it. And they would be able to take them in the balances and make gold, basically. So much, man, to try and put into a short video to explain how this works with CERN. But I want you to have the photos and the things that go with it. But magic circles became a big thing to draw up different entities. We'll take a look at that. So with different alchemical practices came the discovery of phosphorus and chlorine and things like that, and different poisons that could be used on the tips of arrows or spears, and kings would pay for some of this information. And there were also ways that they had found to conjure up the dead, so to speak, or at least demons in a human form. And these secrets were protected and guarded in books with different circles drawn that became keys to open these different dimensions, if you will, to open the different portals. You can see where we're headed towards CERN now. Bear with me. But these circles that they would draw really became keys to open those doorways. Okay, we need to briefly touch on these magic circles in order to lay a premise of how it all works, so that you can better understand what is currently going on. Circles such as this would be drawn on the ground or floor to act as a barrier or form of protection against the unseen forces that the operator would be trying to conjure up or call forth. Whether mage, magician, wizard, or witch, the title of the operator is technically unimportant, as it spans the entire gambit from ancient druids to modern-day Wiccans, all using the same basic principles to tap into this astral source of power. The holy names of God, along with ancient writings and symbols, would be used to control or at least keep at bay these otherworldly entities. Just a side note here, it's interesting that even the Luciferian rely on the holy names of God in order to control his demonic forces. These circles would be drawn with everything from stones, chalk, salt, bones, fire, and even blood, depending on the operator's intent or desire. Different incantations and rituals would be performed to raise energies to strengthen the power of the circles, thus enhancing the probable outcomes of the experience. Also taking in calculations such as times, date, planetary alignments, and the like. In this type of diagram, the operator would stand in the circle and conjure up a demon to appear in the triangle, supposedly bound, and thus adding an extra barrier of protection. It has been recorded that Aleister Crowley used this diagram to stand in the triangle while his accomplice in the circle called forth a demonic force into the triangle. Aleister Crowley was reported as being demon-possessed from that moment on until his death in 1947. Notice the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. That's another study within itself, but it is important, as you'll see. A famous quote of Aleister Crowley was, "Do as thou wilt. This is the whole of the law." Even Jay-Z today promotes that saying. This entity was supposedly contacted by Crowley, who defined him as superhuman and called his name Lam, L-A-M. This is a still shot from the CERN launch video titled Symmetry. Now, baby, you can see why the dark figure can't cross over the circle of salt surrounding the light figure. Okay, now, there is so much information here that overlaps back and forth, you'll just have to try and bear with me. And remember, we're only scratching the surface. Currently, the largest true circle on the Earth is the LHC at CERN. It spans a 17-mile circumference with two opposing beams of energy, said to equal that of the Sun. The CERN scientists have stated numerously in their own words that one of the main goals is to open other dimensions. Now, before I get too far ahead, I have to touch back to The Alchemist once again. Just looking at CERN's YouTube channel, I just wanted to show you that you can go back to all of the meetings and things that they've done and the different experiments. But check this out so you understand what I'm saying. One of their deals, it's 41 minutes. It says, Hang Out with CERN, Isolate, The Dream of the Alchemist. Do you see that? The Dream of the Alchemist. You can actually go on there and see what they have to say about that. Okay, back to the 18th century. A somewhat shady character at best emerges onto the scene by the name of Cyprianus. There are many different legends, but all tend to come to the same conclusion. Tales emerge of a medieval Dane that was so evil that he dedicated his life to writing the 9 books of the black arts that underlie all subsequent Scandinavian black books. One tradition has it the name is traced back to Saint Cyprian of Antioch, who was a powerful wizard who was famed as a demon summoner before converting to Christianity, namely Catholicism. Despite Cyprian's saintly later life, the medieval authors of the time were more interested in the demon part. Vatican history has him being martyred along with Saint Justina. This painting from France shows Cyprian in the background making deals with a couple of devilish characters. What we do know for sure is that Cyprian became a common pseudonym for people on the edges of society who were trying to perform real black magic. And thus we come to one of the most jaw-dropping grimoires of magical spells from the late 18th century. It was just made public domain in 2015 by the Wellcome Trust. The title is Clavis Inferni, or the Key of Hell. Here we have the 4 kings. Mayan, a black bird, as the king of the south. Eurycus, a red crown and winged serpent, as king of the east, again the Ouroboros, eating its own tail. Egan, a black bear-like animal with a short tail, as king of the north. And Paimon, a black cat-like animal with horns, long whiskers, and tail, as king of the west. And there is so much that can be said here concerning the symbols, but they will show themselves again. In this one, the sword and the branch in this image probably refer to the common iconography of God's twin powers to create destruction or peace, much like the Shiva standing in front of CERN. The Latin text reads, Cui facies mirabilia magna solus finis coronat opus. Loosely translated, who alone doeth great wonders, the end crowns the work. So just a shout out here to the Skull and Bones sitting atop the pyramid. Skull and Bones. At the top of this page, the Latin vinculum maximum, or the maximum bond, would seem to imply a great pact, perhaps of the secrecy of the work. And I'm just speculating here. At the beginning of the book, preceding the title page, we see an angelic type being with 7 stars and 7 candlesticks. Those familiar with the book of the Revelation will immediately relate. The book is filled with gold inlay and thus is considered illuminated. Perhaps another shout out to the Illuminati. Here we find the all too famous pyramid capstone in red on a gold page embellished with Hebrew writing. At the top and bottom are markings commonly known as the sigils of angels. In other words, every angel or demon has their own mark or symbol. The page boundary in black with these writings would suggest this is a very dangerous page. The Clavis Inferni, or Key of Hell, has 2 pull-out or fold-out pages. And this one I find the most interesting when actually looking into CERN. Now remember, the purpose of this book was to open a portal or another dimension in order to bring forth demonic entities. Same thing they're doing at CERN. Just a quick note to the star here, the 2 adjoining pyramids, one up and one down, denotes to the as above, so below. So on to the pullout. The inner circle here is in Latin. The pullout itself, I just want to theorize for a minute and do some thinking out loud. But this is on the pullout. The same symbols that we see around the corners here are the ones we've seen on the page with the 4 kings. So we understand even from the Key of Solomon that those are supposedly the directions, or north, south, east, west, that kind of deal. Each one representing whichever. In the center on this is Latin, and you can go in there and look at that. When translating this, we put inside Matthews. It says, the circle is sealed. I offer myself to be surrounded by the same names by which the power of those. If you just take the S off, it says, I prepare myself to be surrounded by the power and those marks and the names of which the circle is, I would imagine, sealed. Again, translating it is very loosely done, so that you get an idea. So if it's exact of what's ordered there, but again, we're talking from the 18th century to now, so I'm sure there is definition lost there. The other language that is there, the letters here, is called Passing the River. That's in a bunch of the grimoires. It's also supposedly some angelic type text. Again, I want to point to the idea of the Ouroboros, where the snake is eating itself. Here, rather than actually eating, you have these 2 arrows coming together, the red tongue pointed to the tail. These 2 are where it's crashing. Again, I want to think out loud for a minute, if you'll just bear with me, and then we'll move right on into a little bit more. But I want you to consider the symbols and the things that you see at CERN. Again, CERN is looking to open another dimension. This book is about opening another dimension. So bear with me, because back in the day they didn't have the same technological advancements that we do, and everything was kept secret. I wouldn't doubt what this is probably a copy of the Vatican's book. And you'll see I've got another shout out to make here in a minute, but want you to look at something, okay? This is the same kind of symbol that we see with CERN all over the place. Every time you see a CERN video or anything, they have this kind of deal, which would be the system or the machine itself, as it were. The serpent here, where it's crashing, you've got beams firing in 2 different directions coming together at one spot, and where they hit and clash. Now, interesting, in this particular book, where it's inlaid with gold and that kind of stuff, the Passing the River is done with gold, but there are 3 gold things here, as in particles. If you look at the particle detectors, this is exactly when they're showing you from inside the particle detectors, or detectors, what they look like. So if we crash the beams together in the particle detector, we'll see these new things. We'll begin to be able to open those dimensions. Now, down here, this is another thing, and this is what blew me away. I was just considering these things, and this particular deal here, we know that there's 2 beams that are fired that go around the circle, okay? You have a beam going one way and a beam coming the other way. And every little bit along that circle, that whole 17-mile deal, they have these magnets, right? That keep the beam bent. And the magnets are what make it where they can bend the light and the photons. And of course this would be the cooling type concept, if you will. So you've got the beam going around in the circle, crashing the particles together, creating the whole CERN, if you will, and the particle detectors, which is what they're studying, and all of this and that. And again, I'm just thinking out loud here, but when I started considering the magnetics and stuff, and I started wanting to look into this book a little bit deeper, so I want to show you just a couple more things, and we'll jump right on in. One more shout out too. This is also a page in that book, and the IHS here is the symbolism for the Jesuits. So we'll give a shout out to the Jesuits too. The Vatican, we know, is ruled by the Jesuits. As a matter of fact, the Pope is a Jesuit, correct? So anyway, let's look at the supposed author of the book. Looking up about the authorship and stuff of the book in St. Cyprian. Again, I'm not going to go into everything about this in particular. We do know it was referred to, without a doubt, the legendary sorcerer and later Christian convert, bishops and St. Cyprian martyred together with Justina. I'm just jumping around here because, again, I'm trying to give you all the information I can here. But anyway, the thing that really caught my mind under this particular part was this right here. Different mysteries of witchcraft, the different magic, healings, and all kinds of stuff that this book supposedly, or the different books that he's got. But when I seen this, it just really stood out to me, the hidden powers of magnetism. I just stumbled across this because I was looking into this a little deeper on this particular book.
The largest number of high-tech magnets ever built. The largest, most complex electronic instrument on the planet.
Okay, that's a quick look at the Clavis Inferni, the key to hell. When looking into these things, especially where the Vatican plays a role, you can find some disturbing information regarding demonology, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put many of the pieces of the puzzle together. Remember, it's about the keys. There's so much I wanted to share about how the energies actually work, and the opening of these portals or dimensions, as it were, and why you need to know. However, as time dictates our limitations, I will try and share just a few more things. Back when CERN announced they were going to fire up the LHC for the big run to find the God particle, and everyone was a chatter about it possibly opening a black hole or destroying the Earth. Well, anyway, at that time of the startup, Stephen Hawking was a special guest at Cambridge's Corpus Christi College on September 19, 2008, to unveil a new clock called the chronophage, designed by John Taylor. The timing of its unveiling, no pun intended, was no accident, as the grasshopper, or giant locust, with vicious teeth and a fierce-looking stinger, was set into motion. If you haven't already, I would strongly suggest you look into it and do a little research. It's quite peculiar, to say the least.
Come to the inauguration of the Corpus Clock and celebrate the release of the chronophage and relative time onto the unsuspecting citizens of Cambridge.
Which brings me to my next point. I had mentioned Revelation 9 about the locusts coming out of the pit. In verse 11 it reads, "And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon." Now a large portion of CERN is located in the territory of St. Guinness Pooli. In Roman times it was called Apolliacum. The town and a temple were dedicated to Apollyon. Apollyon means destroyer. Thus we have the same equivalent in the god Shiva, which stands outside CERN in a statue form, just waiting, as it were, for the one with the key to the bottomless pit. Now many have said what John saw was probably helicopters or war choppers, and he described these yet future machines as best he could in that time. Some have even remarked that perhaps drones of some sort. But I submit to you to consider the reality. CERN is currently creating the Ouroboros of ancients, using the same languages and symbols of Sanskrit, Hebrew, and etc., by firing the beams through these etched plates of glass into the largest magic circle with the energies of the sun and the acoustics of the stars. That perhaps what John saw was exactly what he described, a horde of demonic entities bursting forth from the other dimension. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locust were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, that there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months.
Folks haven't been reading the Bible. Democracy demands that the religiously motivated translate their concerns into universal rather than religion-specific values.
And he said, religion is not necessarily bad. A lot of people seem to need religion with its mysteries and rituals, so they will have religion. But the major religions of today have to be changed because they are not compatible with the changes to come. The old religions will have to go, especially Christianity. Once the Roman Catholic Church is brought down, the rest of Christianity will follow easily. Then a new religion can be accepted for use all over the world. It will incorporate something from all of the old ones to make it more easy for people to accept it and feel at home in it. Most people won't be too concerned with religion. They will realize that they don't need it. In order to do this, the Bible will be changed. It will be rewritten to fit the new religion. Gradually, key words will be replaced with new words having various shades of meaning. Then the meaning attached to the new word can be close to the old word, and as time goes on, other shades of meaning of that word can be emphasized, and then gradually that word replaced with another word. I don't know if I'm making that clear, but the idea is that everything in Scripture need not be rewritten, just key words replaced by other words, and the variability in meaning attached to any word can be used as a tool to change the entire meaning of Scripture and therefore make it acceptable to this new religion.